with communities and local emergency management for, all the time, right? For all hazards, we're in this together. I think certainly my clients agree that that is the goal that we're working towards, and that's definitely the working relationship that we want with PG&E. Last night, I received a note from Sonoma County's interim director of emergency management, and he raised a concern. This was around the winter storms and the widespread outages, and the question of sort of the extent to which PG&E is able to provide supplemental support to customers who are experiencing long outages. And in Sonoma, there have been several communities that had been out of power for over 2 weeks. And the county had asked for additional PG&E support at the county's community centers. So I understand that to mean potentially some backup batteries, just information resources about, the 211 partnership, a number of other things. I'm not aware of the specifics that were discussed. And I understand that the county had received a verbal commitment for that level of support from PG&E's VP of North Operations, Mr. Ron Richardson. And what ultimately happened in the moment when the county finally reached out to PG&E's EOC to call in that commitment and to get that support to the community centers, was that Sonoma was told that the folks in the EOC didn't want to call Mr. Richardson because he was having days off after having been in the EOC for a while. And that, we certainly acknowledge that, PG&E's community relations have come such a long way since we started all of this back in 2018, 2019. And so I wanted to flag this issue as kind of a breakdown in the system, it seems like, and would really love it if PG&E could follow up either with me or directly with Mr. Duvall in Sonoma. That would be much appreciated.
Megan, we had an extended period of weather. Yep. So is there, did Jeff provide you with a narrower time frame?
He did not. I'd be happy to follow up with you offline about that, or you can follow up directly with
Jeff. I'll follow up directly with Jeff. Yeah, because we did provide that support all over the service territory.
Okay.
And so we do have people in place when our region vice presidents are not available. We do have people in place to cover for that, and through ICS, those requests outside of what Ron has provided, those requests should come into the EOC through our liaison officer, and then we partner with the customer strategy officer and we deliver the request. And so that shouldn't have anything to do with reaching out to Mr. Richardson.
Okay, and thank you, I appreciate that. And that process you just described was Sonoma County's understanding of how PG&E generally structures those programs, and so it seems like there was a failure point somewhere in there that we'd like to follow up on.
Yep, absolutely. I'll take that as an action, Megan, because that's not the way we want things to go. And I'll go ahead and reach out to Jeff directly, and we'll get more information and see what we can provide him.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, Angie, because I know in the event we handed out hundreds and hundreds of grab and go bags that were provided as through the county emergency services. So yeah, we'll have to follow up. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you, Megan, and thank you for the follow-up. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I do have another question that we received. This one comes from Cal Advocates, and this one's to all utilities. How has communication with public safety partners evolved over time? And specifically, what improvements has the utility seen in event operations regarding backup generation, coordination with telecommunications, water, and emergency services?
It's a great question. So there's multiple parts to it that I think are important to address. I heard the word telecommunication relationships, and I know that's something that we're all really leaning into. The telecommunication providers also provide an essential service to customers during de-energization events, and it's really important for us to be tight at the hip in terms of both preparedness and response. And so last year, we engaged the California Utilities Emergency Association and kicked off a series of discussions around helping each other prepare for PSPS events. And it resulted in a number of deep dive sessions with each of our telecommunication providers, where we would provide lists of circuits that are most frequently impacted so that they could have awareness on like where to prioritize their mitigation activities as they're preparing for and responding to potential PSPS events. And then I think just more broadly, so you mentioned like the partnerships with public safety partners. And I think what comes to mind for me is these are not the types of relationships that you want to be making during the event. These are types of relationships that you want to have established before the emergency even happens. And so being able to pick up the phone and be on a first name basis with emergency management counterpart at the county, those are the targets, that's the goal. And so it takes a ton of outreach on both sides proactively ahead of events, and not just for PSPS, right? For everything, because our emergency management practices have existed far longer than PSPS has been such a prominent concern. So I think those are just a couple of thoughts I'd like to share. I'll close by saying that our critical infrastructure providers are required either by law or industry best practices in most cases to have a resiliency plan. So they need to have backup generation in place to be able to withstand an outage, because they can happen for any reason at any time. And in some instances with disasters, they can be widespread and they can extend for longer durations. And so we're partnering with them, we're working with them. We have critical infrastructure workshops where we're going out and meeting with them and explaining the importance of resiliency. And we see them leaning in and making sure that they have response plans in place in the event that during a PSPS event or other emergency, if we find out through our emergency management counterparts that there's a critical infrastructure provider who's having difficulty sustaining essential operations, we'll immediately jump on a call, intake, triage, disposition that issue, and make sure that we're looking for options to support those customers. Thinking back to past PSPS seasons, a couple of examples come to mind quickly for me with water agencies that have reached out saying that they're concerned about their ability to withstand the outage, and jumping on calls and discussions with the duty manager at the counties and being able to work through those is a testament, I think, to the relationships that all three IOUs have built with our emergency management counterparts.
Yeah, and hey, this is Tom Smith with PG&E. I would echo everything that Tom said in our experience, starting in 2019 from a really reactive approach to working with some of these customers, going into the pandemic event and working with the California Hospital Association, the Hospital Council of Northern and Central California, and then starting to proactively look at those ICU centers and help partner with them on some temporary generation. And remember, even though many of these hospitals, they do have that obligation to have backup generation. However, they don't have usually a second backup generation. And in order for them to perform surgeries, they have to have a second source of backup. So it really limits their operations. So we feel like in the partnering through that pandemic and that critical time, being able to partner with them and proactively provide some support was really critical. Partnering with the water agencies, as Tom mentioned, we have seen a reduction in the requests for temporary generation in any event. I think of Lebec down south in Bakersfield. Their water agency was looking for a lot of support initially, and now through the years and our account managers working with them, now they have their own backup generations in place to get them through any wildfire safety outages. So I'm really proud and impressed by all of our account managers and our critical infrastructure leads working with the telcos, water agencies, hospitals, and other critical facilities to help them understand their responsibility and their role in preparedness for these wildfire safety outages. And like I said, we've seen a reduction in overall requests each year. And we'll continue to do education, as Tom mentioned, like the telco webinars and transmission customer webinars and other things to help them understand impacts and get ready for the season.
Great, thank you so much. Did SDG&E have anything to add on this one?
No, I would just echo what both PG&E and SCE said. I think we jointly meet. I think I'm on 4 joint IOU meetings a week. So we jointly meet to ensure that we are aligned and that we share our best practices and lessons learned to ensure that those partners that we work with that span the entirety of the state and work with all 3 of us, right? That we have alignment on all of those and on our processes as well.
Great, thank you so much for those responses. I'm still not seeing any hands raised. So at this time, I think I'm going to hand it over to Nathan Poon for the final Q&A session of the day, which will open up questions related to all panels and that were discussed during today's workshop.
Hey, Jessica, just really quick, could I provide one piece of information for Will's question? Earlier,
Absolutely.
I've been waiting for the end so I could didn't interrupt the flow. So we also do have a report it app for non-emergencies for our customers where they can provide us intelligence if they see a hazard in our infrastructure. They could take a picture, they could push the information to us. And so I just wanted to share that as another opportunity for that crowdsourcing of information.
Thanks for that. And that's actually the application that I was inquiring about. And I think San Diego Gas and Electric also highlighted within their presentation. It seemed to be a similar application for crowdsourcing. And so just wanted to, I appreciate that information and just really trying to look at the development of that in terms of how you were incorporating that information into your overall wildfire mitigation activities. So leveraging that information to be able to troubleshoot vegetation management issues or down lines or things of that nature. So that's where I was going with that question, but I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say, Will, because it's focused on non-emergency, because we don't want to unintentionally put our customers in a dangerous position, we're really asking them to identify for us when they see a leaning tree, a leaning pole, something like that we can proactively address. That information comes into the system and we dispatch the right people to go take a look at it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Just want to say thank you again to all the stakeholder panelists for the great questions and discussion, and to all the utility representatives for the presentations during this session. And with that, I'll hand it off to Nathan.
Thanks, Jessica. We'll open the floor up to questions for any of the panels today. I understand some utility representatives had to drop off a little early and some may not be back until 4:30. So we'll do our best to organize the questions. I know that I saw a couple hands come up right at the end before Jessica handed off. If there are still questions related to community outreach or any of the topics that were just covered, those are fair game as well. So please don't be shy if you have something to inquire about. Just because we handed over does not mean that you cannot ask those questions. I see David has his hand up in the attendees list. Can we get David Gleba the ability to ask his question?
Yeah, good afternoon. I trust you can all hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Hey, I'm just jumping onto this panel, having literally just read about this event about 15 minutes ago. So I want to respect your process and your agenda. My comment has to do, and my question has to do with the allocation of undergrounding miles in the wildfire mitigation plan as it was filed in late March. And as a Sonoma County resident, we're looking at about 7 miles of undergrounding being forecast in the next 3 years in Sonoma County, and about 155 miles of undergrounding being forecast for our neighbors in Napa County during the same time period. So that disparity seems to require some explanation to those of us in Sonoma who have been repeated fire victims. And I don't know if this is the time or tomorrow after one of the other sections, whether that would be an appropriate time to ask for a reply to explain that disparity and how the community can be involved in providing feedback on those decisions.
Yeah, thanks for your question, David. We did cover grid hardening earlier this morning. I don't know if Jim or if there's another representative from PG&E that can answer that question at this moment.
Yeah, Nathan, I think we have Matt Pender from the PG&E side who will be able to provide some level of a response for David.
Yeah, David, good question. Thank you for joining to ask it. So our undergrounding projects are targeted based on our risk models that identify where the greatest wildfire risk is based on the probability of ignition and the consequence of ignition. All this laid out in our wildfire mitigation plan. We also took into account the feasibility of undergrounding in different areas of our service territory for different circuit segments. How difficult would it be based on hard rock, steep elevations, other factors? And using those two things, risk and feasibility of each circuit segment, we prioritized our risk list of circuits and started working down the ones that are in the top segment of that priority. There are a number of areas of the service territory that have considerable wildfire risk, as we all know. And so it can be fine margins between why one county in particular may have more mileage than another county. And that's, I think, what you're pointing out here, right? That Sonoma County has maybe less than Napa County. But that's what it is driven by, which is our risk model combined with efficiency or feasibility factors. We are updating our risk model every year, basically. And our next risk model will come out at some point in 2023, and we'll use that to inform the next tranche of projects that we select. And so the mileage going forward will continue to evolve in alignment with our latest and greatest understanding of the risk. So that's why that happened, right? Is driven by our risk and feasibility assessments of the circuits in Sonoma County versus any other neighboring county you might select, including Napa. And it's aligned with our philosophy in terms of trying to reduce the most risk as efficiently as possible with the work that we're completing. So yeah, that's the background there.
I don't want to hog the floor. Is there an opportunity for a follow-up on that, or how's your format?
Yeah, if you have a follow-up, please go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I guess the looking at the circuits that are listed on the plan for Sonoma County and looking at, you do have a relative difficulty index, which I trust goes into providing some quantification of how difficult it is in certain areas to actually do the undergrounding. Obviously, it's hard for us to evaluate that without sort of seeing what the difficulty index is for other areas that clearly are extremely high risk. So a PG&E spokesman responded yesterday in our local media to a question about this disparity by saying that basically they also had local fire officials and other local folks involved who were on the ground. I'd just like to know who those folks are. In specific in Sonoma County, you know, we have a road called Nuns Canyon Road. It's 1.5 miles long. It is the source of the two most damaging wildfires, both power line caused in Sonoma modern history in 1964 and in 2017. That road is scheduled with a vote of the Board of Supervisors last week to be repaved in the coming year or two. If there was any road that would potentially give the most bang for the buck in undergrounding, and I don't live on that road, I'm just saying that as someone who's local, that would be pretty compelling for about 1 mile or 1.5 miles of undergrounding. So I'm just curious, who are the local folks who are informing this in addition to the strictly sort of what we'll call algorithmic approach that you described there, Matt?
Yeah, PG&E has public safety specialists. Those are members of the PG&E team who have fire or other first responder backgrounds. They both provide their own expertise and they coordinate with local first responders on a range of issues, including guidance and feedback on our plans here, on our wildfire risk models, and on specific projects, things of that nature. So those are the people who coordinate it, our public safety specialists. And I suspect that your local fire chiefs know who PG&E's public safety specialist for their area is. So that would be the person to connect with, like the fire experts in your region. I will say community specific issues like when is a road being paved are not, as you mentioned, in our algorithmic assessment, but that's useful information and potentially may change our plans for a particular circuit. If it was on the plan for several years out, but it's going to be paved soon, yes, it may make sense for us to move that forward and coordinate with the community's plans. So that's good insight. And that's the venue through which we usually gather it, is through our local public affairs representatives or through our public safety specialists.
Okay. I guess the last question is the Patty Poppy and Ron Richardson made themselves available to present to a community group in Napa back in November about the undergrounding plans and to answer community questions. And I also know you're going back to Napa for your Investor Day for a tour on May 25th to show off the undergrounding work there. For those of us that are feeling a little bit slapped in the face in Sonoma, notwithstanding the description of how the risk assessment is done, what would be the opportunity to have a similar community meeting where we can basically have an opportunity to ask our questions? And I appreciate this venue as well, of course, but since Napa has been afforded that courtesy, we'd certainly like to do the same with some of our electeds and community members.
Yeah, we can take that back to our customer engagement, community relations teams, and talk about that. If there's a particular meeting or group in question that you're thinking, is where you'd like to have additional engagement from PG&E, we're happy to, take that request and consider how we can support that best. So yeah, let us know what you think the right venue is.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anybody else with questions, please raise your hand. I'll turn over. There's a couple lingering Q&A questions that I'll read out. This first one is from Lee Kamerich for SCE. Does the fast curve setting or fault detection mentioned result in automatic power outages for customers akin to PG&E's EPSS program? Is there someone from SCE's team? I'm not sure if Ray is back on that can answer this.
This is Tom. I think Ray's going to be over in a minute. So I think it'd be nice to wait for him if possible. But generally the answer is no. He can expand more when he jumps on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. And then there was one more question from the earlier session for PG&E from RW2 in the attendees list. For PG&E, in 2022, you completed 180 miles underground. Your target is 2,200 miles by 2025, about 700 miles per year. What programs will need to be cut to achieve the additional 500 miles per year? Maybe I can reframe this as, what is your plan for achieving those additional 500 miles per year? Is there somebody from PG&E that's able to take this question?
Yeah, this is Matt Pender from the undergrounding program. So a couple comments. One is this question sort of framed, what are you doing less of because you're doing more undergrounding? It's not that clear, but we do have our general rate case, which is presents the years 2023 to 2026, outlines our whole range of proposed investments on the distribution system during that time frame, including the specific exact miles of undergrounding, which ramp up during this period, and the unit cost for which are ramping down as we get achieve economies of scale and drive additional efficiencies into our projects. And so the GRC general rate case sort of lays that all out, including all of our other programs on the distribution system. some of which are growing and some of which are shrinking. One that is shrinking is our overhead hardening program. As we've discussed a little bit, we're doing somewhat less overhead hardening as we do more undergrounding. We did over 300 miles of overhead hardening last year, 2022, and we'll be moving down to a steady state of about 50 miles a year by the end of the GRC period. So there is a little bit of a switch there. But in general, that's what I'd say on that aspect of the question. In terms of ramping up, we are doing a number of things to add and pursue additional technologies to make us efficient in doing this work, and partnering with a number of skilled resources from the design space to construction and electric installation to get us the resources and build the machine that can operate at the faster speed of undergrounding that we anticipate delivering on, which is 750 miles in 2026. So we're ramping up our tools, we're getting more efficient, and that's laid out in our WMP as well as the GRC.
Great, thank you. There's one more written question. I know Ray from SCE is not available yet, but it applies to all three utilities. So maybe PG&E and SDG&E might have someone that can answer this. SDG&E, PG&E, and SCE all have embraced fast curve or EPSS settings that significantly reduce the energy released by faults during elevated fire weather conditions. However, only PG&E's EPSS program seems to have significantly affected reliability. What is the difference between these programs that would account for this difference? So maybe this should be taken by PG&E first.
Nathan, on that one, I believe Dave Canny answered the question. If Dave is still here, he can jump back on. Others, I'll take a shot at it. Dave, are you on?
Yeah, I think we did take that one live and speak. And one of the aspects we spoke to was the criteria differences as well, and those are tied to the differences amongst the service areas between PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E. So I'd say primarily that's associated with the amount of time that EPSS is enabled, circuit days over the course of the fire season. And one point of clarification, EPSS by and large does not necessarily mean more outages. And I think we've heard the other utilities speak to this as well. What does happen by design is that more customers are impacted typically. So the same outage that would be at the end of a fused tap line impacting 50 customers without EPSS enabled might impact more like 500 customers. So there is a reliability impact, no doubt, tends to be concentrated. And similarly, our reliability mitigations are targeted to mitigate future outages going into 23 and beyond.
Okay, great, thank you. And I see Ray from SCE is back on the panelist list. So I'll read the last written question out again for SCE. Does the fast curve setting or fault detection mentioned result in automatic power outages for customers akin to PG&E's EPSS?
So fast curve means when it senses a condition, it's going to de-energize the line. So if that's I'm pretty sure that's akin to PG&E. So PG&E, from my understanding, EPSS, when it senses a fault condition, it de-energizes. Our fast curve is very similar. Our settings are different, but once it senses that condition, it does de-energize.
Great, thank you. We have a few more minutes left. If there's any attendees that have any questions from any of the panels today, please take this time to ask your question. If there's a panelist from earlier today that has a lingering question, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you to ask your question. Okay, seeing none, we can go to the next slide, I think. Before we close out today, I'll just remind everybody that all the documents related to the WMPs can be found on Energy Safety's e-filing website. There are 2 dockets related to the WMPs. The main one is listed on the top. We also have a separate data request docket, which is 2023-2025 WMPs DRs. And with that, I'd like to thank all the utility presenters, all of our stakeholder panelists, and all those in attendance today for joining us. We'll start back up tomorrow at 9:30 and cover situational awareness and risk assessment. I hope everyone has a good afternoon.